All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulty when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, John Kulhavi, I can't wait to hear your stories today. I started to hear a little bit before the podcast, and I was like, oh, no, I don't want to know anymore. You really, it sounds like, have had an incredible life. You're about to turn 81, you said, in 4 days.
Yes.
And is this your first in-person podcast?
Yes.
At 81 years of age, first
got
podcast. So, John, I'm going to start this podcast the way that I start all of mine. Before you tell me about where you are today, take me all the way back. Where were you born and raised? What were you like as a young kid? You know, what was your family life like? What did you think life was going to have in store for you when you were young?
I had no idea.
And then let's start to build up to your story today.
All right. I lived in Hamtramck, Michigan, which at that time was predominantly a Polish community, probably 99% Polish American. I lived there for the first 13 years. And then the week of my 13th birthday, my parents built a small grocery store in a little town up north, and we relocated there. I loved Hamtramck. I loved living in the small town. The name of the town was Skidway Lake. We had 300 year-round residents, 10,000 in the summer, 300 the rest of the year round. They advertised at 20 lakes in 20 minutes because we had 20 lakes. They're all surrounded by cottages. Memorial Day, everybody roll in. Labor Day, they'd roll out. In between, you had a few hunters, ice fishermen, snowmobilers, and I loved both of them. After I graduated from high school, I went to Central Michigan University for a couple of reasons. It was one of the schools I thought I could get in. I was a B student, but I worked from the time I was 12 years old, and then when I was 15, my father left. And it was my mother and 4 kids, and we lived in a one-room cabin. We didn't have much of anything, but my mother always provided for us, and I was the oldest, so I had a lot of different jobs.
If you don't mind speaking about it, what in the world is that like, having to become man of the house at 15 years of age? You're the oldest sibling.
You don't have a choice, so you just do the best you can, and I did. I could tell you 20 stories of different types of jobs I had, but one of the more interesting ones, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings because I'm not sure if I use the right terminology, but I was reading the Ogama County Herald. That was the local paper. I went to school at West Branch, which is Ogama County, and then my sophomore year they changed districts, and I was transferred to Whittemore Prescott. Anyway, they advertised for a driver, and the only criteria you had to have a valid driver's license. I was 16 years old. I had a driver's license. My mother had a 1955 four-door, six-cylinder automatic Chevy, downhill with a strong wind. It may do 65. And I asked my mother if I could use her car. I said, I think I could make some money. She said, yeah. And they were going to pay me $20. Gas said was 33.9 cents a gallon. I figured I could net $14. $14 you could buy a lot of milk and bread. Anyway, they just said I had to transport some people from West Branch to Traverse City. So I drove to West Branch early one morning, and they had me sign all kind of documents. And they brought out 5 adults that were all 100% mentally retarded. And they put 3 in the back seat. This is before seat belts. 2 in the front seat with me. I was smaller than, obviously. And one guy sat in the back seat at the passenger door. He looked like a serial killer, but he was as docile as a kitten. I'm halfway to Traverse City. I'm about 5 miles south of Kalkaska. And this guy in the back seat kept saying, I got to go bathroom, got to go bathroom. And I said, hang on, I'll get you there. I drove as fast as I could, turned onto the main street in Kalkaska. And if you're a there's a main street with stores lined up on both sides. That's basically it. Stopped right in the middle of the street. I get this guy out of the car. I told the rest, stay here. I'll be right back. I explained to the lady behind the counter the situation. She said the bathroom's in the back of the building. Go ahead and use it. I walked back there. He went in the bathroom, came out. We walked out. The other 4 were gone. It took me 2.5 hours to find them. They were scattered all over that town. And I kept thinking during the day, 2.5 hours is a long time to search for people. What would happen to me if I signed for 5 and I only delivered 2 or 3 or 4? So I knew I had to find all 5. So we go through a store, and if I found one of them, I'm holding hands with the serial killer guy. They'd hold hands. Pretty soon I got this train of retarded adults going through one store and out the other. I got to Traverse City late that night. I think I got home at 2 or 3 in the morning. They gave me my $20, and I resigned. I didn't want to do that anymore, but that was one of many jobs I had. I wouldn't trade anything. I think it made me appreciate later in life what I was able to accomplish and acquire.
When you went to CMU for college, did you have a trajectory in mind? I mean, you probably knew, like, hey, I want to go to college because that's what successful people do, right? And college back in the day was way more powerful than it is now. Like, you knew that if you were trying to put your life in order and become your best, you were going to go to college. Did you know why you were going?
No one in my family, my mother's side of the family or my father's, had ever gone to college, and I was determined I was going to go. Didn't know what I was going to be. Initially, my mother wanted me to be a doctor. I ended up with 2 degrees, a minor in biology and a minor in chemistry, and I didn't like either one. And especially the biology, dissecting cats and frogs and mice, and it just wasn't my thing. So I changed to a psychology major, not knowing exactly what I was going to do. But I liked ROTC. Back then, it was a state law. All male students at state-supported schools, there's 14 in Michigan, were required to take 2 years of ROTC, and I liked it. So at the end of my 2 years, I applied for advanced ROTC. I was accepted, and I did it. I liked the instructors, I liked the program, and they paid me $27 a month to go to class. $27 was a lot of money. My freshman year, my father paid for my tuition, no money for food, living expense, housing. And then after that, I was on my own. I lived on a elderly lady's back porch for $5 a week, and I slept on not a World War II, a World War I bunk. 4 guys upstairs in the apartment, me and another guy on the porch. The lady that owned the house on the main floor, 1 bathroom for all of us. So I had $5. My budget was $10 a week. $5 for my room, $3 for food. My staples were hot dogs and Kraft macaroni and cheese dinners. I could buy for 19 cents a box. Fortunately, I liked them. And $2 a week for gas. I had a 1952 Chevy I bought from a friend of mine that went in the Air Force for $80. It was all rusted out, had 120-some thousand miles on it, but it was good transportation. And because of the jobs I had to have a car.
Man, what in the world did that do for character development? From like having to become the man of the house at 15 to you're taking on extreme responsibilities like signing for 5 adults that you're going to transport to living in a place where 1 bathroom between 6 people. You had to be a fully matured 7 people, fully matured man ready to take on whatever life was going to throw your way by the time you're in college. I mean, a lot of college kids now have never faced a lot of what you've already described as, you know, responsibilities, challenges, setbacks, and a lot of people have their own difficulties, but it's an incredible story so far. What makes you decide that you want to go into the military, or did you get drafted?
I liked everything about it, and my parents were very patriotic. Actually, when I got married, my youngest brother came to my wedding, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going in the Army." He said, "If it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me." 2 days later, on Monday, he enlisted, and he was going through basic training at Fort Knox. My first assignment was I was an armor officer, so I went through armor officer basic course, and I became a tank commander. I was in charge of 5 M60 A1 tanks, which at that time was the Army's main battle tank. But I liked the ROTC. And actually, one of my instructors just died recently, and I took him out to lunch last year. It was good to spend some time with him.
100%. Where did you meet your wife? Did you meet her in high school, in college?
I met my wife in college. I was married for 26 and a half years, and she was a good wife. I came home from work one night, and she said, I don't want to be married anymore. I saw it coming for years ahead of time. Now, fortunately, my two daughters, one was ready to graduate college, the other was junior or senior. And then I was single for 17 years, and I finally got remarried. It was 13 years ago this month, September. No, last month, September.
Wow. So you decide you're going off to the military. One of your little siblings joins with you. Now, has Vietnam already kicked off at this point when you're going?
Yeah, it did. I could have graduated at 64. I only needed a couple credit hours. But Central was one of a handful of colleges nationwide that was selected for a pilot program to teach potential Army officers how to fly. Our lessons were at Mount Pleasant Airport. The airport manager was our instructor. I'd never been in an airplane in my life, and I applied for that because I wanted to see what it was like to fly. And then when I went on active duty, after I was a tank commander for several months, and I got every odd job you could possibly expect in the military. One of my responsibilities of all the lieutenants in this armor battalion, there were probably 20 or 25, I got two odd jobs. I was selected to be commander of the aggressor forces. They would bus the students out in the morning, we'd do maneuvers, train them, and then at night they'd bus them back. I was the only officer that stayed in the field 3-4 nights a week with all my enlisted guys, my sergeants, and it was a great experience. And then the other job I had, we had 5 M60A1 tanks that were meticulously maintained. They were in a heated garage, and they were serviced every day of the week. And I believe they were the only tanks on main post to have a full complement of ammunition. That includes for the main cannon, the machine guns, and so on. And with some regularity, I'd get a call in the middle of the day or night, and they timed us. I had to contact my first sergeant. We had to contact the 5 crews for the M60 tanks, report to the garage, get in them, crank them up, and drive as fast as we could down the main streets of Fort Knox and surround the vault. Our job was to protect the vault against enemy air or ground attack. At the time, I thought, pretty important deal. I look back at it, kind of hilarious. We don't even know if there's gold in that vault anymore, but that was one of my jobs. Anyway, then I got orders to go to Kreilsheim, Germany, border patrol between the border of Germany and Russia with 5 M60A1 tanks. I went to personnel 3 times. I said, I went to flight school at college. I think I was supposed to go to flight school in the Army. Nope, you're going to Germany. After the 3rd or 4th time, they found in my records that I did go to flight school in college. So they canceled my records in Germany and sent me to rotary wing flight school. The big demand was helicopter pilots. Anyway, my first day at flight school, I was very inquisitive. I knew nothing about helicopters, never saw one. And I asked the instructor, I said, what do you do if the engine quits? He said, you auto-rotate. I said, what is auto-rotate? He said, you lower the collective. That's the power. That's the control in your left hand. There's a centrifugal clutch. The transmission releases the rotor blade. The rotor blade becomes freewheeling. And as long as you maintain your rotor speed, that's the wind blowing between the blades, you guide the aircraft down. I said, what do you do if the rotor quits? He said, simple. He said, you immediately go into the helicopter pilot's emergency position. I said, what exactly is that? He said, very simple. Spread your legs, bend at the waist, and kiss your ass goodbye. I never forgot that. Anyway, I love flying helicopters. I had 3,600 hours flying Hueys, 1,000 hours in combat. It was just a great experience.
Man, that's incredible. The first time you left the country, being from the small town and, just the leader of your family, you've taken on some responsibility, but you left the country to go to Germany or something. Was that a major cultural shock? Do you remember what you were like?
I didn't go to Germany. I went to Vietnam.
Oh, you never actually ended up going to Germany. I thought you had gotten there and then come back.
No, they canceled my orders, sent me to flight school, which was a year.
Got it.
Half in Fort Wilders, Texas. Then after Vietnam, I went back there, and I was in charge of the academic instructors.
Got it. I had misinterpreted, thought that you were over in Germany, and then when you came back, they said, oh, he did go to flight school. So you just went straight to Vietnam. Was that your first combat experience or live experience?
Well, I went to Fort Wilders, Texas for primary helicopter training, and that was 4.5, 5 months long. I don't recall. And then I had a short leave, and then I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama for Huey transition, instrument training, tactics, all the advanced stuff. And I was fortunate enough to graduate at the top of my class, which helped me a lot when I went to Vietnam. And then a couple of weeks before I was supposed to go to Vietnam, something unusual happened. I got a change of orders holding me at Fort Rucker as the operations officer of the student officer company. And as obsolete as the computers were, somehow they caught an assistant that my youngest brother was in Vietnam. And they didn't want us both there at the same time. So they changed my orders, and they cut them so close. I left San Francisco the same day my youngest brother left Cameron Bay. We passed en route. But during the time, I picked up another 100 hours of flying time. You got 210 hours of flying time in flight school. When I went there, I had over 300 hours, which gave me an edge on my contemporaries. That extra 100 hours helped quite a bit.
So are there any moments from Vietnam that you'd want to share, or like the good or the bad, the ups or the downs, the surprising events, anything that you'd like to just capture and that you think people would, learn from, take insight from?
I'm a very positive person. I mean, I'm the eternal optimist. No matter how dark things are, I'm always trying to look at the good side, not the bad, and I do that with people also.
Where do you think that comes from, John? Because I'm the same way. Where does that come from?
My mother, I think, she was that way. She was a very positive. She had nothing, but she always looked at the good, not the bad, and I kind of inherited that. But I learned three things in Vietnam that I don't think I would have learned anywhere else that helped me later in the military. I was very fortunate. I retired as a general officer. Fewer than 0.5% of career officers become generals. And it helped me tremendously in my civilian career. And those three things were, at a very young age, I had tremendous responsibility placed upon me. 3.5 months after I arrived in the country, the unit commander designated me to be the primary flight leader. So every day I selected all 10 crews for combat missions. We flew combat virtually every day of the week. And I was responsible for 10 Hueys. Sometimes I had gunships escorting me. I was responsible for them. I was responsible for the crews, four men in every helicopter, and then 6, sometimes 7 infantrymen in all their gear. So I was responsible for human lives and millions of dollars worth of equipment. The second thing, you have to learn how to make decisions very quickly. It had to be the right ones because you could never predict what's going to happen in a combat mission. That helped me tremendously. And third, I learned how people reacted under tremendous stress. I quickly came to the conclusion I found no correlation between physical stature and courage. The biggest, toughest, baddest guys in our unit sometimes totally fell apart when the bullets started flying. I had a crew chief by the name of Jerry Sperlin. His nickname was Itchy Rat. He had buck teeth, thick glasses, and he was always chewing on something. Probably weighed 130 pounds soaking wet. When it got hot, he's the guy I wanted with me. He never lost his composure. He was as cool as a cucumber and always did his job above and beyond. So those three things helped me the rest of my civilian career. I was very fortunate. I did very well. And I formed the first team in Merrill Lynch history from lessons I learned in the military. Financial advisors then worked as individuals. And I kept going to my manager saying, look, I really believe no matter how intelligent or how much you study, we can't master this vast array of products. But if we operated as teams of specialists, we could not only provide better performance, but certainly better service. After nagging my manager for a year or so, he called me in his office one day, handed me a ticket, said, you're flying to New York tomorrow morning. You got a 1-hour meeting with Donald Reagan. Donald Reagan was chairman of the board of Merrill Lynch. He became Secretary of the Treasury and a chief of staff for President Ronald Reagan. I did a little homework. Donald Reagan had been a Marine combat veteran of World War II. I was Vietnam. We had something in common. I flew to New York. I told him my proposal about advisors working as teams of specialists. He took copious notes, asked me a lot of questions. At the end of an hour, he said, I like your idea, do it. Picked up the phone, called my managers, let him form a team. It was the first team that we know of in brokerage history, and that was 1971. Today, 70-some% of all advisors are on teams, and they want them all to be. They saw the benefit of it.
That is incredible. you were able to change the corporate
Culture,
structure
yeah,
and
yeah.
culture of Merrill Lynch, an American institution, based on, first of all, your confidence, your competence, and your self-belief, and the eternal optimist that, like, there's a problem here, but your combat experience in your mind and the responsibilities you encountered in Vietnam and in your early life allowed you to see a problem, visualize a solution, and go after it. That's unbelievable.
My failure in life is my divorce, and I've always regretted that. But once my daughters were in college, they say either the parents get closer or they come to the conclusion that the children are the glue that held everything together. And my wife and I went different directions. She was a good woman. She became very actively involved in the women's lib movement. She resented me being in the reserve and working full time because I was working long hours. It was like 2 full-time jobs. And in the 17 years that I was single, my kids were gone, my wife was gone. I devoted tremendous time to my practice. When I retired, my team was one of the top 10 in the country. We managed several $billion worth of money for clients in 28 states and 5 foreign countries. So it was a great experience. I don't have any. I told my wife and my daughters, when I die, I only want 2 words on my tombstone: no regrets. I have none.
That's incredible. And to get to your age in life with all the things you've seen and done, to be able to feel like that and know that, like, hey, I did the best I could. John Kulhavi went through this life trying to be a good man, trying to make a difference, being the eternal optimist that I saw in my mother, and I tried to do things the way that I could. And I've made mistakes, and I've remedied them,
Yeah.
and I learned from them. I mean, really, that's what all great men and women do, is when you mess up, you recognize it, you acknowledge it, and you adjust your course accordingly. And that's what makes a better version of you.
You know, I could quote a lot of famous sayings. I like famous sayings. Some of my favorites: Jack Nicholson, the Academy Award-winning actor, said, "My mother never understood the irony of calling me a son of a bitch." Rod Stewart, the famous rocker, after several failed marriages, said, "Instead of getting married again, I'm just going to find a woman I don't like and buy her a house." George Burns, the comedian who died at age 100, at age 90, said, "Making love to a 90-year-old man is like shooting pool with a rope." But the one I think I live by is 29th President, Theodore Roosevelt. He's made the statement, "Speak softly, carry a big stick." But he also made the statement, "Far better it is to do daring things, to win glorious triumphs, though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much because they live in the great twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." In other words, it's better to try something and fail than do nothing. I've had many failures. I've had successes. So that's what I live by.
And without your failures, you're not the man that you are today. It's like
Correct.
the
Try
failures,
to learn from 'em.
they were necessary. They're necessary ingredients to the outcome that you've produced. Without those failures, let's say you would have had a fear of failure that didn't allow you to go into these endeavors and these obstacles and just try to find the best solution, you wouldn't be the man that you are today. You need every part of your story to end up here at this moment as the man you are with the impact you've made on the world around you. And look at the community you have around you. We were talking a little bit before the podcast, the Eric Hipples and all of these people that appreciate you for who you are and what you've done. So it's like being an optimist and being willing to go into the fray, not knowing the outcome, but saying, I'm going to give the best I can. I'm going to give it with 100% of my spirit. I'm going to try to do the right thing. That yields so many more results than just the momentary success or failure of the current objective, right? Like that's what life should be all about.
I know you want to talk a little bit about the military. 13 months ago, I was asked to address an audience of 1,300 disabled veterans. And I told them I'm a pretty easy-going guy, but there are a couple things that totally anger me, piss me off, to put it bluntly. And one is the fact when they say we lost the Vietnam War, historians, newscasters, I'm going to give you the facts, okay? President Johnson became very unpopular because he escalated the war, and the war was not popular with U.S. citizens. He elected not to run for re-election. Richard Nixon ran on the Republican Party ticket on the platform he's going to get us out of the war. After he was elected, he appointed his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. Now, you can check these facts, and you'll find they're accurate, okay? He asked Kissinger to contact the North Vietnamese and try to work out a truce. They did. And the truce was based upon the U.S. had to withdraw all of their military forces, and the North agreed not to attack or invade the South. The last American fighting man was out of Vietnam on March 29, 1973. The North totally disagreed. We honored our agreement. They didn't. Within weeks of us pulling all of our troops out, they invaded the South. Saigon fell on April 30th, 1975, 2 years and 1 month later. And I asked myself, how could we have lost the war? Well, we weren't even there. We left 2 years before that. We never lost a major battle. Our kill ratio compared to the bad guys was 10-1. That upset me. And the other thing that upsets me, we had a policy, and I enforced that to the extreme. I never left anyone behind. One day I led 10 ships in a combat assault. We landed right in the middle of a huge North Vietnamese force. I lost 3 ships in the landing zone. Nobody left until I had those crews, and every living American loaded. We were overloaded. How we ever got out of the LZ, I don't know. But my belief was, how could you order a man to go into combat knowing if he were captured, no attempt would be made to retrieve him? We never left anyone behind. So when I think of this Afghanistan debacle, it angers me. We left not only did we lose 13 soldiers during the withdrawal, but we left hundreds behind, especially allies that worked with us, supported us, helped us, interpreters, and so on. Those are the 2 things in life that still upset me.
And it sounds like, I mean, it's just such a deep-held belief that you have that, like, I won't leave people behind. I'll probably defy orders if I have to. I'm not leaving my brothers behind. I can hear the words through. I can see the look in your face that you're like, I don't care what has to be done. That's me out there. That's my brother out there. That's my family member out there. And like you said, how can you ask people to go and fight for this cause and say, hey, if you get stuck in a bad situation, we're not helping you? That's not what teams do. That's not what people that care about each other do. That's not what you do for your family. If you know what I mean? Like, you have to find a way to try to be there for them.
I enjoy telling humorous stories. We were authorized 52 or 50, I think it was 52 pilots in our unit. We never had more than 46. We were always short pilots. The chance of getting killed as a helicopter crew member were 28% higher than any other job in country, including infantry. And helicopters accounted for more kills than artillery or infantry. But you get 40-some guys who all think they're young hotshots, and they're the ones that I wanted with me when we were going what you call full suppression mission, where you know you're going to get fire, you go in guns blazing, you come out guns blazing. Anyway, our camp, I was with the 25th Infantry Division, one of the bigger units in country. We were based right outside of a town called Cu Chi, pronounced C-O-O-C-H-I, Cu Chi, but spelled C-U-C-H-I. There was a village there at our base camp. Most nights when we came in, we flew 2, 3, 4 nights a week. We had 2 full-time medevac ships that did the daytime medevacs. We did the nighttime medevacs. We did resupply. We picked up KAIs, killed in action, bodies. We did everything they wanted us to do. And most nights we come in, we get fire from the village. We are not allowed to return fire because they had a pacification program going on, trying to convince the villagers to be on the side of the government. Anyway, we kept thinking, we got to get back at these dips. They're shooting at us every night. We can't return fire. One of the guys in the unit, wish it was me, wasn't, but another guy came up with a brilliant idea. A lot of monkeys in Vietnam. He got a monkey from somewhere, put a collar on it and a long rope, and he taunted this thing every day with a stick. He made that monkey so mean that everybody went by, he wanted to jump on you and bite you. One night I came in, it was 2:30 in the morning, I don't remember. And this monkey was up on the roof of we built hooches, which are small buildings out of ammo crates, and that's where we lived. This monkey jumped on my back. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I remember reaching back and throwing him as far as I could. Anyway, when we got this monkey really, really mean, one of our missions was to drop parachute flares that night to illuminate the battlefield. We took the flare off. The parachute's about that big around. We attached a very easy to get out of harness, and we put the monkey in. We flew over the village, broad daylight. We pushed the monkey out, and This monkey is very inquisitive. He gets halfway down, he wants a better view. He climbs with the lanyards. The lanyards are the ropes that connect the harness to the parachute. He gets on top of the parachute to get a better view. The parachute collapses. He goes down like a ton of bricks. He bought the farm. We get a second monkey. This one was even meaner than the first one. We pushed him out over the village. Now, every 2 or 3 weeks, we get a newsletter published by the division headquarters about the different operations that took place. Within days of pushing that monkey out, front page of the newsletter, rabid monkey by 6 villagers. Yay, we got back at those SOBs. That's the kind of stuff we did for laughs. I can tell you more stories, but that's one of my favorites.
Wow. And I mean, when you're in that type of a chaotic situation, it's like little things like that are, in a weird way, probably an escape from it, from all the chaos. Like
It was, correct, yeah.
you have this angry monkey that's going to go terrorize the enemy when you're having to deal with this conflict every single day.
Another thing that we did, and we thought it was great fun until we found out it wasn't. You ever watch a World War II movie where the fighter planes start peeling off and are strafing the trains, the tanks, the armor, whatever? We like playing World War II fighter pilots, okay? You could drop a Huey 3,500 feet a minute. I mean, it falls like a rock. Kick it on a trip. We had no doors or windows on them because we didn't want the extra weight. We needed all the power we could get without the extra weight to haul our ammo, our full load of fuel, our combat infantrymen, and all their gear. But anyway, in Vietnam, if you have to urinate, you're not going to land. That's asking to die. We had 5 first aid kits in a Huey, and each one had a supply of plastic bags. You'd urinate in a plastic bag, you tie a knot, push it in the back of the cargo compartment. Never threw them away. Now, you get a bag of urine that's been 100-plus degrees heat for a week or two, it gets pretty rank. And what we do it for, one day I'm leading a 5-ship mission, and we're heading back to base camp. The last aircraft to flight is called Trail. Anyway, he keyed his bike, said, lead, armor column at 3 o'clock. No, at 9 o'clock. And I looked out. The aircraft commander sat in the left seat, the pilot. We didn't have pilot and co-pilot. Aircraft commander and pilot. Pilot sat in the right seat, aircraft commander left. I look out, sure enough, I see a row of tanks and our personnel carriers right along the edge of the jungle. Everybody knew what was going on. I keyed the bike. Flight, this is lead, go trail. That means go from our current formation, single file, 2 to 2.5 rotor discs apart, half rotor disc higher than the aircraft in front of you, so you don't get this rotor wash. When I got parallel to him, I say, flight, lead, peeling off in 5-second intervals, which means every 5 seconds, I want another Huey following me. Now, these guys, these tanks, they know what's going on. The crews never rode in the vehicle. It'd be like riding around an oven. It was too hot. They all sat outside until a bullets started flying, then they got inside. The only one inside was the driver. And here's 5 Hueys falling out of the sky, and they're scrambling to get in. You can pull a Huey out of a dive at 50 feet, and you pull out 3 to 5 feet above the highest obstacle. What's the highest obstacle? The armored vehicles in front of you. So now I got 5 Hueys. We're doing 125, 130 knots. It's about 150 miles an hour. The crew chief and gunners are on the skids, and they're pulling all these bags up. We get over, we're dropping these bags. We're having great fun. Now, these guys didn't see any humor in this. They'd been out in the woods for 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks without a shower, change of clothes. And as soon as we dropped our load, you immediately turn in the direction that gives you the best visibility. I'm sitting left seat, so I crank it over right on the side to the left. Want to see what I hit. The lead tank, the main cannon, is turning with me. When I get 90 degrees off, he fires. They can reload that thing in a matter of seconds. He fires a second time. He's trying to shoot my ass out of the sky. They saw no humor in this. So after that, I thought, it'd be pretty embarrassing to say you got killed because you're dropping bags of urine on your own guys. But we thought it was great fun at the time. After that, I thought twice about doing it.
Oh my gosh. Like you said, though, those are the stories and the moments, the humor that will stick with you forever. Like you were in a hell on earth and you guys were doing, what you did just as a band of brothers to get through that experience. Mm-hmm. When you got done with Vietnam and you had to transition back to just being a civilian, coming back to America, you're back, in a time where there was a lot of turmoil towards Vietnam veterans. Like the return home was a kind of a brutal period for a lot of people.
The sad part is the American public never realized that soldiers don't get to pick which wars they're going to participate in. You're given an order, you follow the order, and you execute it to the best of your ability. That was my job. And I had a lot of different jobs that were varied, and I tried to do the very best I could. But I was very fortunate. I loved the military, and I considered staying in. The Department of Army called me 3 or 4 times, upping the ante every time. I had a good record. I'd been a flight leader, 1,000 hours of combat time, roughly. I could go to the college of my choice for my master's degree, duty station of my choice. And the Army wanted me to get my master's degree and then go to Cobra transition. The Cobras were just coming in country when I left, and go back second door flying Cobras, which I would have loved to do. I was shot down twice the first time. My youngest daughter was born after my tour of Vietnam. And my wife said, why don't you try civilian life for a year? And if you don't like it, you can always come back. And I thought that was a reasonable request. So I applied for a job at Merrill Lynch. I sent letters to 5 offices. 4 of them said thanks, but no thanks. I didn't have the background they're looking for. The Fisher Building, I had 9 managers in my 48-year career. The first one was the best. His name was Fred Pickard. His claim to fame, he was a receiver in the 1955 Rose Bowl, caught 2 touchdown passes. He was a great man and the best manager I ever had in my entire career. Anyway, he said I'd be interested in talking to you. So I flew to Detroit. My flight was late getting in. I had an appointment that afternoon. Back then, in the early stages of the war, this is 68, okay? The people supported it, and the longer it went on, it reversed. They didn't support it. But you got a discounted airfare if you flew in uniform. Later, they told you not to. Anyway, because you'd be harassed. I flew in uniform. One of my brothers picked me up at the airport. Flight was late. I was going to go to my mother's house at Hamtramck, change clothes, and go to the meeting. I told my brother, I can't be late. Take me right to the office. It was at the Fisher Building, downtown Detroit. I walked in uniform, had a nice array of medals. The manager was a naval officer. He respected the uniform. He could tell by the awards I had been around, and he offered me a position. And I didn't have a background in sales, finance, banking, anything to do with it, he took a chance on me, and I always honored him for that.
That's incredible. And it's also it's a reminder in a society where we always want to see someone be something before we give them the opportunity to, that there's a lot of good people out there, men and women, that have incredible capability and potential if they could just be given the opportunity, to cross a threshold where if that manager said, no, we're not going to hire you now, you never get to be the man that you are. Now, you would have found another route, but it's a great reminder to people that people are more than what they seem on the surface.
Well, I believe fate has a lot to do with your life, and fate entered my life 4 or 5 months after I left active duty, and I really missed the Army. I loved it, and becoming a trainee in the brokerage, it was worse than pledging a fraternity. I mean, you got some lousy jobs and assignments, and anyway, I was contacted by an Army Reserve unit, 70th Division Infantry Training, headquartered in Livonia, Michigan, and they had all of the infantry training units in Michigan and Indiana. The operations officer was a major who later retired as a general. His name was Ron Wooster, called me and said, I'd like to meet with you. So I drove to the Reserve Center. They had staff meetings every Tuesday night. He said, we're authorized an aviation unit. He said, we have to have a senior captain or a major heading it. I want to offer you the position. And I accepted it. Now, I had no aircraft. I had one admin warrant officer. My desk was in the attic of the Reserve Center, and I had nothing. I made a lot of phone calls. I wrote a lot of letters. Within a couple of years, I had a beautiful alert hangar at Selfridge Air National Guard Base full of aircraft. And I recruited the pilots, the mechanics, everybody. And the aircraft was interesting. One day, the Commander General drove out, and he said, Kulhavi, you got more airplanes than you do pilots. I said, sir, nobody told me you had a minimum. I got a beautiful fixed-wing aircraft from the California Department of Natural Resources, painted orange. We had it repainted, Army colors. We got Hueys from Corpus Christi, Texas, that been Vietnam veterans that were rebuilt. We got Hillers, trading aircraft from the Boneyard in Arizona. I got aircraft from the Customs in Florida that have been confiscated for drugs. The problem with those, a lot of them had salt corrosion. But now I had the best of both worlds. I had a career that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I still had the Army. I was a senior captain. As I stated earlier, I was fortunate enough to retire as Brigadier General. I had great assignments. I flew for 18 and a half years. Now, after the war, my buddies that stayed on active duty were flying 40 hours a year because the defense budget was cut dramatically. What they lost, the reserve and the guard got. I was flying 200-300 hours a year in the reserve, and my buddies on active duty were flying 40 hours a year. So I was very, very fortunate. I've had a blessed life.
There's actually something I want to bounce back to really quick. You referenced Fred as a man that made a major impact on you in your
He
life.
did.
And there's probably some people in the military that you had met that made like a major impact on you.
Yeah.
Who are the people that really stand out in your mind as people that helped shape you into the man that you are today, like mentors or leaders or coworkers?
My two commanders in Vietnam, who were both majors, Charlie Brown was the first one, and the second one, his name was Polk. I don't recall his first name. They had a big influence on me. A couple of generals I worked for in the reserve. I mean, I had some good generals and I had some bad generals. And I don't think I want to go into that, but they had an influence.
So what is being a good leader to you? As a man
Setting
that's
the example, looking out for your men first and foremost. If you're in a field and you're wet, your gloves are dry, and you got to enlist a guy in a bunker or in a foxhole, and he's wet, give him your gloves, give him your coat. Take care of your enlisted men first and foremost. If it weren't for them, you wouldn't be where you're at. I was always a huge believer in that. I gave a speech. I've given many speeches over the years raising money for veterans, especially from Iraq and Afghanistan, because I personally think they had it worse than we did. I don't remember.
you gave a speech. We were talking about doing for others. Like you were giving the gloves to the new recruit. You've given some speeches.
Yeah. Anyway, I made up the story, but I told us that in one of the speeches I gave. I always believed the non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, ran the military. The officer's job was to provide the resources, clear the obstacles, and stand back and let them do their job. I always maintained that philosophy. I treated my non-commissioned officers with great respect. I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, after I became a general. My first assignment was to conduct an infantry training program at Fort Benning using reservists to see if they could train with the same amount of efficiency and proficiency as the full-timers did. And actually, we did it. But my first week there, a young E4 corporal knocked on my door, specialist 4, we called it. He said, "Sir, can I have a minute of your time?" And I said, "Come on in." I said, "Have a seat." I said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "I want to make the military a career. I've been trying to get funding and a slot to go to an MOS qualifying school, military occupational specialty. That would help him with his career and help him get his next promotion." And he said, "Can you help me with that?" I said, "I can do both." I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. In the military, we have a chain of command. What action did you take before you came to me?" He said, "First thing I did was went to my company first sergeant." He said it was way beyond his scope of responsibility. I went to the company commander, told me he could help with the slot, but not the funding. Then I went to battalion. Then I went to brigade. I didn't get anywhere. That's when I came to you. And I said, "Before you came to me, did you go to the sergeant major?" He goes, "No, sir, I'm not ready to go that high." Now, I'm a general, okay? Anyway, I tell another story. First course of action on this operation was to transport several hundred troops from main post to the field. I knew my staff was proficient, and I knew they were on top of everything. My first big assignment, I wanted to make sure all the bases were covered. First course of action was transport several hundred troops, main post to the field. I called a motor pool. Now, when you call a motor pool, you don't know who's going to answer. Could be a private, could be a sergeant, it could be a civilian mechanic. This guy answers, "Yo, motor pool." I said, "Can you give me an inventory of your vehicles?" He said, "Yeah, I got 2 5-ton trucks, I got 5 deuce and a halves, got a couple of Humvees, I got a shiny new sedan for a big-ass general." I said, what was that again? I said, I got 2 5-ton trucks, 5 new sedans, a couple of Humvees, shiny new sedan for a big-ass general. I said, do you know who this is? No. I said, this is General Kulhavi. After a long pause, he said, do you know who this is? And I said, no. He said, good. See ya, big ass. Anyway,
That
the
is
military was a
hilarious.
great experience. I have no regrets. I would do it again.
That is a hilarious story. To this day, there's someone out there that knows that he answered that phone call and spoke to you like that.
You know, several years ago, I was interviewed on a radio show that specialized in military, I guess. And being in the military was very unpopular at the time. And he kind of belabored that. And I said, let me ask you a question. You probably have thousands of listeners right now, do you not? He said, yes, we do. I said, okay, open up your phone lines and ask every veteran that's listening, if he had it to do over again, would he? And what % found it to be a positive experience in their life? And I'll bet you any amount that 90% plus are going to say it was a good experience. He said, I won't take that bet because I know you're right.
And I would attest to that same exact fact from every Vietnam veteran or even most military veterans I've ever spoken to. They say the same thing. They're like, I am who I am because of that experience.
Yeah,
and the love that I had with my brothers and the camaraderie we had is unlike anything that I've found in civilian life. They've had close replicas of it, but I think it's when you take that high intensity life or death situation and everything has such severe consequences, you create a bond between people that's just much deeper than most people can understand.
You know, I'm very active at Central Michigan University. I've been on virtually every board. I was on the Board of Trustees, and I chaired it for a long time. And I have a couple buildings there named after me and a significant number of classrooms and other meeting places. But because of effort and contributions and so on. But my proudest accomplishment, the current president is Bob Davies. Before Bob Davies, it was George Ross. Before George Ross, it was Mike Rao. Mike's now the president of Virginia Commonwealth. Mike called me to his office one day, and he said, and he had the director of public relations in the room with him. He said, we want to do something for you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you spend a lot of money, you devote a lot of time, you made some good things happen. We want to do something for you. It took me about 3 seconds. I said, I'd like a nice sign in front of the ROTC building. He said, John, that's what you want, a sign? I said, yeah. He said, I'm curious, why? I said, when I was student here, we had a beautiful brick building right in the center of campus. I said, today you have the ROTC relegated to the oldest building on campus and are in a corner. And I said, to me, it's degrading. There's a sign, a metal strip says ROTC. Now, this was a Desert Storm, okay? I said, a whole bunch of those graduates are going to end up in a combat zone. I want them to have something to be proud of. He said, you want a sign? You'll get a sign. I don't remember, a month or two later, I'm back on campus. Mike Rao calls me in. Now he's got the PR director and the campus engineer in his office. We want to show you your sign. We walked across the street to the ROTC building, the metal sign about this square, Army ROTC. How do you like your sign? My exact words. I said, it sucks. I said, that's the best you guys can do? And the campus engineer said, we have a signage ordinance. I said, a signage ordinance? He said, yeah, that's the biggest sign we can put up. I said, okay, do you have a monument ordinance? He said, no, never heard of one. I said, good, we're going to build a monument. We did. It's got a brick base. It's black marble, big gold letters, Army ROTC. It's got their insignia on it. Every car and person that drives by or walks by can't miss it. It's right there. That's my proudest accomplishment at Central.
That's incredible. I mean, you left a mark on the campus that future generations will see for who knows how long. And it's because of your contributions and honestly what it did for you.
No, it's my persistence.
Yeah, and honestly what the ROTC did for your life.
Yeah.
Imagine John Kulhavi that never went that route with his life. Who knows who you would be? You know, so it's an incredible thing that you're able to not only give back, but create something like that for how many young kids are going to look at that monument and feel a certain way in their heart, and then it's going to lead them to a good life. It's going to lead them to opening doors that they might not have opened otherwise.
You know, you talk about young people. The sad part is today, a very small percentage of the U.S. population is eligible to serve in the military, okay? And I saw the numbers once, something like 334,000 out of 34 million. And about 70% of those are not eligible because they either have a criminal record, they use drugs, or they're overweight. And that saddens me because every branch of the armed forces today is short personnel. The Army alone is short over 25,000 men. And I don't know what's ever convinced you. You heard the saying many times, freedom is not free. Everybody enjoys the freedoms, but very few are willing to pay the price to maintain those freedoms. I wish more of them. I think if they served the military for just 2 years, it would have a very positive impact in our life. I recruit and I talk to as many as I can, but it's hard to accomplish.
100%. I mean, the discipline, the being a part of a team, the responsibility, all of those things build people. It might seem to young kids like, well, I don't want all those responsibilities. Yes, you do. Because the person that comes out of taking on responsibility like that and discipline and character growth is the person that you want to be. It'll make you a better father, friend, worker, etc., leader. So you do want those things. You might just not want the work that goes with it, but the magic is in the work. That's a perfect segue to maybe a last part. We have about 10 minutes left. This is a perfect segue. Life has changed dramatically over the course of your 81 years here on Earth. Like from the world that we live in now, on a technological basis, to political views, to patriotism, to just culturally, this nation has changed tremendously.
Yeah.
What are the couple moments that stand out so majorly in your life, or the things that you would just say as an 81-year-old gentleman speaking to a 35-year-old, child in comparison about just, the wonderful or terrible moments that you've experienced over, like JFK, you lived through. John F. Kennedy, you lived through, obviously 9/11 and all these other things, and Oklahoma City, and these are the terrible parts of our culture.
The saddest day of my life was watching Saigon fall. And I sat there in front of the TV and I said, we lost 58,000 men. And what did we accomplish? Unfortunately, politicians are very eager to send men off to war because they don't have to do it themselves. And more times than not, they're not right. I'm going to give you an example. The Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, during the Vietnam, he was formerly the CEO of Ford Motor Company. He never spent a day in the military. I don't even think he was in the Boy Scouts. And he was telling the generals how to run the war. I believe then, and I believe till the day I die. If they would have told General Westmoreland, who was in charge at the time I was there, start at the south and don't stop till you take North Vietnam. We had the strength, we had the equipment, we had the motivation, we could have done it. But they never did. We take an area, we withdraw. We take it again, it was stupidity, the strategy they used.
That doesn't make sense to me. And obviously there's all these rules of engagement and all this red tape laid out by politicians and, and
political. The generals advised the president, don't withdraw from Afghanistan. We only had 2,500 soldiers there. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what we've got in countries all over the world. But they provided two things to the Afghan army that they could not survive without: military intelligence and air support. And when we took them out of there, it went to hell in a handbasket. Within a matter of weeks, the whole country fell. The generals warned the president not to do it. He did it anyway. Bagram Air Force Base, we should have stayed there till the very end. We pulled out in the middle of the night and left our allies holding the bank. That's the kind of stuff that angers me.
Yeah, and it just doesn't make sense. And
it doesn't.
To take someone that's doesn't understand the circumstances firsthand and allow them to make the decisions that are going to steer the course of the war, that doesn't add up to me. And I hate to say this, and maybe I'm wrong for even saying it, but it almost seems like the Vietnam War was just this, meant to be sustained, where it's like, oh, you take a little ground, you give a little ground. It doesn't make sense.
When I first got in the country, if you were fired upon, you had freedom to return fire. By the time I left, if we got fired upon, I had to call higher headquarters. They then had to call higher headquarters and get me permission to return fire. Sometimes that took 10 or 15 minutes. By then, the bad guys were long gone. That was pure dumb stupidity.
If it could be you and, let's say, 20 other generals, and you had all the firepower, all the American support, all the technology we had, and you were able to go into Vietnam, I feel like you can just get the job done if you're not your hands aren't tied constantly by all these different parameters you have to work with.
Occasionally, and not often, I think about my Vietnam experience. For me, I told you, it was positive. I was shot down twice, and pilots only had 2 fears: being captured and burning. Those are the two fears we had. Other than that, we did everything in our power to support the infantrymen. But I don't.
Being shot down the first, I mean, your aircraft got shot out of the sky and you crash landing and you survived that twice.
You know, I'd like to say there was skill involved. I believe then, and I believe now, it was an act of God. Okay, I'm a firm believer. I'm a Christian. We had an operation right on the Cambodian border against a huge North Vietnamese regular army force, far outnumbering us. We had 25 Hueys in our unit. We lost 18 in 3 days. One of mine was one of them. But earlier in the day, I took 14 hits. I had 14 bullet holes in a Huey, hit nothing critical. I kept flying it all day. The last mission of the day was to take a load of Bandolier rockets to an infantry unit setting up right on the border to give them protection of their perimeter in the evening. As I was coming in, we had a 50 caliber. They had a 55 caliber. They had a quad 55, 4 barrels they used to shoot down aircraft, helicopters. They opened up on me. One round removed the gearbox from the tail of the aircraft. Now, the tail rotor is called anti-torque. That prevents the aircraft from spinning. So now not only do they have no anti-torque, but the center of balance of the aircraft just went to hell because that gearbox weighs about 60 pounds and it sits right on the tail end of the aircraft. There's no emergency procedure for that I'm aware of. The only smart thing I did, I rolled the throttle off to kill the torque to the engine to hopefully prevent the aircraft from spinning. It did. We went into nose down yaw, and I remember I sat back in the seat. I got no controls. I got my guys on board. I keyed the mic and I said, "Oh shit!" I figured we just bought the farm. And now, when I say an act of God, in the middle of the jungle was a 32-foot deep B-52 bomb crater. We drove it right down the side of the crater. We hit so hard we tore the skids off. The transmission shifted forward, crushed the top of the pilot's compartment. Now, until then, I'd always hoped I were a little taller because girls I wanted to date were sometimes taller. After that day, I said, the big guy made me short for a reason. The guy next to me, his name was Tommy Richardson. He was 5'9". He had very, very severe head injury, spent 3.5 months in the hospital in Germany. Took the paint off my helmet. I got this scar, cuts, bruises, tore muscles. But I was the only guy who walked out of that aircraft. Why that 52 crater was in the middle of the jungle, I have no idea. But I don't know till this day if I went out the top or what was the windshield. We hit so hard, my 45 went from my shoulder holster, and they found it 15 yards away from the aircraft. Anyway, the gunner ran up to me. He still had the handles to his M60 machine gun in his hand. His arm was broken in 4 or 5 places. He couldn't release it. He runs at me, Lieutenant, what do I do? And I said, grab any weapons you can find, because the 45 is not going to do you any good. When we flew combat, which is virtually every day, if we went down, the crew chief and the gunner took the M60 machine gun off the Huey, had a quick release snap. Their M16s, they hung on our seats. We took the M16s. One machine gun was smashed up. They salvaged one. Anyway, I started scaling up the side of the crater, and I heard somebody screaming. I remember I took my helmet off. I threw it. I didn't like the visor because they're always scratched up. I always wear sunglasses. I remember taking my sunglasses through it. I'm trying to get out of there before the thing goes up. Anyway, I hear somebody screaming. My crew chief's leg is pinned under the Huey. How that happened, I have no idea. We hit so hard, the gunner broke his shoulder harness, flew across the interior of the aircraft, hit his arm on the crew chief's gun mount, and that's why he had so many breaks. Anyway, I had very little confidence in the South Vietnamese. That day, they gave me confidence. 5 or 6 of them. Now, I got North Vietnamese regulars on one side of this crater, South Vietnamese with Army advisors on the other side. They're shooting out, and I'm in the middle between them. I went down, and 5 or 6 of these South Vietnamese came down, and we're all pulling on this guy, and he's screaming like crazy. We didn't know it at the time. He had a broken collarbone. He had broken ribs. He had a big chunk of meat out of it, tore out of his leg. He had a lot of broken bones, and we were pulling on this guy trying to get him out. The Army sergeant, who's at the other end of the crater, on his stomach, yells, "Get away from the son of a bitch, it's going to blow up." Well, it wasn't going to blow up. Smoke was rolling out of the engine compartment because when we hit, we broke the fuel lines. We're not using gasoline. It's highly flammable. We're using Jet A, which is basically fuel oil, okay? And that smoke was just rolling out of the aircraft. And we had self-sealing fuel bladders. So I wasn't worried about the thing blowing up. He yells at them to get away. They turned around, they started up the crater, and I yelled at them, "Come here!" And I waved. They came back. And I motioned to them. I didn't speak Vietnamese, and they didn't speak English. So Huey's not that heavy. It's made of aluminum and magnesium. Push against the aircraft, me and another one, grab this guy. We pulled him out. They pulled him off in the woods. Tommy Richardson, I thought was dead. He was slumped over the controls. His face was covered with blood. I climbed on top of the Huey. By then, the sergeant came down. You cannot believe what adrenaline does for you. I lifted him out of the seat, slid him down the side of the Huey. The sergeant took him. The Vietnamese guys hauled him off in the woods. Now, Tommy was the only guy in our unit that wore a wedding band. They told you not to wear a wedding band because when you did your pre-flight, there were cargo hooks all over the Huey. They're afraid if you got a finger caught, you're going to lose a finger. Tommy couldn't get us off for 9 years. It was too tight. While they risked their lives and hauled him off in the woods, they took his wedding band and his watch. That was their reward for saving him. Anyway, they brought me one M60, 2 bandoliers of ammo, and they left. And I got 3 wounded guys with me. And I'm picturing myself at the Alamo. I'm going to blaze away. Those 2 bandoliers are gone, and then it's all over but the shouting. A medevac ship tried to come in before dark. He took fire. He left. I thought, I'm screwed. I'm here for the night. I'm not going to survive, but what can I do? Nothing. Anyway, in the meantime, this one guy is still screaming. The aircraft commander every day signed for 2 things, an SOI. That was your packet of codes and frequencies of all the units you're going to work with. If you're flying where they're firing live artillery, you ought to tell them to shut the artillery off so you don't get shot down by your own artillery. And you had a morphine packet. I couldn't find that morphine packet. I had no weapon. I went back down that crater. I'm picking up pieces of the SOI. Why it was tore up, I don't know. I'm jamming it. We had a pouch in the front of we call it a chicken plate. It was a chest protector to give you protection from the front because our seats were armored, but we had no protection from the front. Anyway, I found a morphine packet. I go back up. I gave him 1 injection. We learned all this in flight school. Took the ampule, put it in his collar, bent the needle. He's still screaming. I give him a second one. Do the same thing. Now, I knew 3 would kill him. But you put the needle in the collar, so when they were medevac, the medics would know how much morphine they had and not give them more because they'll die for sure. Anyway, the second time the Huey came back to medevac us, they didn't shoot. He's got no place to land. He hovered at the edge of the crater. And I'm pulling these guys out of the woods, handing to the 2 medics in the back of that Huey. Now, we flew D-model Hueys. They had 650 horse engines. They were upgraded to 750. I never saw an H-model until I later flew in the reserve. And I told the pilot, once he gets my crew loaded, I said, you can't take me. You're going to be overloaded. You'll never get out of here. Take them. Come back and get me if you can. And he said, this is an H model. Get on. I said, you're overloaded. He said, Lieutenant, it's an H model. I didn't know what the hell an H model was. Anyway, I hopped on. They took the thing straight up 100 feet, nose over. Oh, I thought, what kind of Huey is this? I never saw any. This power was unbelievable. Anyway, they flew us to a mass jet right on the outer edge of where the big battle was going on. They bring stretchers out. I said, no, I'm fine. I ran into the tent. Doctor came up and said, you're cut up pretty bad. I need to stitch you up. I said, I'm fine. Take care of my guys. And I sat on a cot like this, watching them operate on 2 of my guys. When they're done, the doctor comes and says, I need to get you cleaned up. I couldn't stand up. When we hit, I tore the muscles in my back. The adrenaline kept me going. Once I had a chance to relax, everything tightened up. Anyway, For the next 3 days, I slept in a fetal position. The guys in my unit would carry me out. We called it a six-hole, our outdoor toilet, and they'd bring me food. And every day a doctor would come in and give me injections in the back. I'm sure they were muscle relaxants. The third day, or the afternoon of the third day, I could finally stand up. Within an hour of being able to stand up, I was in my flight suit back in the cockpit. They wanted you to fly right away so you don't have time to dwell on what happened. Tommy Richardson had 3.5 months to think about it. He came back and went ballistic on two missions. They had him supervise maintenance the rest of the tour. And he was a great man. But anyway,
Man,
I've been very blessed. That's about
that is like divine intervention, the fact of the way that your height and all of these
Yeah.
factors just, and there's a crater there, and the fire stopped for the 1 point to allow the Huey to come in. Like, that is how could it almost feels like, how could it not be a divine, like,
That's
walking
what I-
fate?
That's what I said. To me, it was an act of God.
So, John, man, I tell you what, I love hearing your stories. These are incredible. We're at our hour mark, and I do have another meeting coming up, but I would love to do a part 2 where I talk to you more about, like, your civilian life, your build up through your career, the things that you've done. And, like, you're huge into charity contributions, Josh had said to me when we were standing out there. I would love to highlight those parts of your life too. So if you enjoyed the dialogue today, maybe we can shoot a part 2 where we really focus on, any other stories. It'd be great
we
to
can
tell.
do that.
But I really enjoyed our time today. I appreciate the fact that you brought me a book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And John, just thank you for your service. Thank you for your contributions to the world. The CMU monument will be there forever because of you. And thank you for sitting and speaking with me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.